mind, body, nutrition, the Triple Play Podcast. Because everybody's an athlete in this game of life. Get off the sidelines. Time to get in the game.
Everybody, happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is that you guys have been celebrating. Hopefully you guys are having a great time, spending time with your family and friends. I know a lot of you guys, myself included, eating a lot of food and just some of us taking a break. And I love this time of year, with all the festivities going on. And, the main things may have changed with COVID and how we do things, going out and, maybe some of you going to concerts, not being able to go to concerts or what have you. Things have changed. But, one thing that hasn't changed is the season of giving, especially in this time of year. So we're going to have a lot of giveaways. If you guys have been following me on Instagram, we've been doing some giveaways these past few weeks, and we're going to be doing a lot more. And in the coming year, we're looking to partner with a bunch of different foundations that we're going to be giving towards. That's one of my goals of what we're going to be trying to doing. Anyhow, it's been raining like cats and dogs here in Hawaii. And not the paradise, sunshine, beaches. It's been raining cats and dogs. Flooding out, been craziness. You guys may hear my cat actually in the background there. We got flooding going on. We got the Navy. Their fuel tanks have been leaking into our water supply. We got all kinds of stuff going on. It's been craziness. And hopefully that, you guys are listening to this podcast, we can bring some sort of normality to your life. So in this podcast episode, I have a special guest. His name is Norman Plotkin. And Norman is a cancer survivor, and we're going to talk about hypnosis today. He's a certified clinical hypnotherapist. He's an advocate for people and author of 2 books. Well, one is called Take Charge of Your Cancer, and the other one is Master Mind, Master Life. So it's a book on the history of hypnosis and its ancient beginnings. I thought this was very interesting, right? You hear the word hypnosis and all kinds of different things come to mind. So Norman was actually a former public policy consultant and lobbyist. And then he made a decisive life change after battling cancer. A big one, right? And then he emerged with a newfound perspective on life and living. Norman has a passion for utilizing and understanding the subconscious mind and its power through natural processes such as hypnotherapy and coaching. Norman helps clients overcome a wide range of issues that impact the human condition such as health, behavior, and performance. He aims to serve his clients and help them discover their power. Through all his struggles, Norman has persevered and wishes to help others persevere in their lives. He is kind, spiritual, and determined to share his knowledge and those who seek it. And you'll see from this interview that all of those things are so very true. So without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Hey everybody, we have a special guest on the podcast today. We got Norman Plotkin, and we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff surrounding hypnotherapy and his story. Let's actually jump right there. Welcome to the podcast, Norm.
Thanks, Dr. Mike. Great to be here.
Yeah, let's start with your story. When I got in contact with you, I read your one sheet, and right off the bat, it really attracted me because of your story. Would you mind sharing a brief introduction to your story?
Not at all. So I had a 25-year career in politics and lobbying, and I thought that was the greatest thing, and I got to college late after the military, and I did some blue-collar work in oil fields, and so I was in a hurry, and started out as a clerk in the legislature and worked my way through consultancies and ran campaigns, and at one point I was the health committee consultant to the state assembly, and then I lobbied for the medical association, the CMA, California Medical Association, and then I went out on my own. I had my own contract lobbying firm, and I represented clients before the California legislature and agencies. And it was heady stuff. It was very exciting.
Mhm.
But politics is, it's a dirty game. It's ugly.
Politics.
There's,
Yeah.
and so it took its toll on me. It wasn't what my authentic self was about. And I ended up, getting sick. I had cancer. And interestingly enough, it was papillary carcinoma, thyroid cancer. So in my throat, which the throat chakra is your voice in the world.
Interesting.
And I didn't have my own voice. I was an advocate, and I love being an advocate for others, but it wasn't my voice. It was always someone else's. And so I think spiritually, that had played a role in it. And so initially I followed all the directions. I had a radical thyroidectomy, a lymph node resection, and 2 rounds of radiation. And I just wanted to get back to normal. But the problem was, as I came to understand, as teachers began to appear, and the likes of Wayne Dyer and Carolyn Meese and Deepak Chopra and others began to open my mind, I realized that normal was the problem and I needed a new normal. And so I dove into what became about a 7-year spiritual awakening. And along the way, I was guided to the power of the subconscious mind as I navigated my cancer journey. And so I gained a keen interest. I also gained a keen interest in complementary and alternative modalities. And so I found my way to the nationally accredited School for Hypnotherapy in Los Angeles, jumped right in and didn't look back. And so that's been 6 years.
Yeah, before your diagnosis, were you open to any of this stuff, or was this like a complete 180-degree turn for you?
180. I represented allopathic medicine.
Oh wow!
I knew hundreds, even thousands of doctors, and it was all about the conventional therapies, and that was my worldview. That's what I understood, and I don't try and steer people away from that. I focus on what they call complementary. So I would never. I wrote a book called "Take Charge of Your Cancer: The 7 Proven Steps to Healing and Recovery." But I don't recommend people not see their doctor or use an allopathic approach to their therapeutic strategy. But there are ways that you can engage yourself. You see, you're the one with skin in the game, and modern medicine, you get 10 minutes with the highly trained person. I mean, let's face it. Physicians today are very well trained and educated. But you get 10 minutes, and they're not there at 10 p.m. when the walls start to move in and you have questions, right? And so we look for things that we can engage ourselves in our healing and recovery. So, it was a 180, definitely.
So what were some of the first things like that you dove into after you started down this path?
Well, the power of the subconscious mind, living intentionally. I'll tell you, one of the keys for me was a friend of mine. She had gotten out of politics and opened a yoga studio. And she took me through therapeutic yoga for cancer. And most importantly, she taught me how to meditate. My overactive mind that made me a super good analyst and still does, was monkey mind when you're facing complicated emotional circumstances that there's a lot at stake. And so being quiet and still is super important. That therapeutic yoga for cancer, and then Pilates to regain my strength after the radiation. My friend Jean really helped me out there. So learning to meditate was super powerful. Also, understanding that our self-talk is important, because we're listening. In fact, every cell in our body is listening to that onboard conversation that we all have. And as I learned about the placebo effect, where, the sugar pill does 30% of the time does as well as the therapeutic, and also the nocebo effect, that there are studies that show that over 70% of medical students suffer actually the symptoms of the diseases that they're studying about. And so we can either make ourselves sick or better. It's kind of like that Henry Ford quote, if you think you can, you're right. And if you think you can't, you're right. So these are the things. Then Wayne Dyer's book, The Power of Intention.
Oh, I love that
Living
book.
Intentionally. great book. Carolyn Meese, Anatomy of the Spirit, Deepak Chopra, Quantum Healing. These were the teachers that began to appear and the texts that I began to read that have led me to, the place where I am now is I use hypnosis in the therapeutic setting, but mostly it's about empowerment because let's face it, people today largely surrender their power to external forces. He said, she did, the government, the corona, it's really easy to point outward.
Yeah,
and
especially
blame.
now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Let's dive into the whole notion of hypnotherapy, because, for me, a little bit when my wife was pregnant with our first son, we went to a birthing center and we went with a doula, and one of the things that they talked to us about was using hypnotherapy during the birth process. So we actually went through a course with one of our doulas called Hypno Babies. And me, like you, I have, like that left brain scientific mind. I was like, okay, hypnotherapy. I've seen this on television at the circus. They got the guy that they make bark and he's running around the entire ring. And it, for the majority of people, they think about it that way. But when my wife started using it and I started using it alongside with her, I started to notice things happen. And she still utilizes a lot of those techniques that were taught to her for pain and all that kind of stuff. But let's dive into like hypnotherapy and kind of dispel some of the myths, kind of go into the backstory of like what is hypnotherapy and what's going on in the body during hypnosis.
Yeah, absolutely. I've taken my daughter through hypnobirthing 3 times, and she was afraid of the pain and had heard many stories from all the women that she knew. And she wanted natural, but was afraid of the pain. And so I took a certification in hypnobirthing and took her through it 3 times. And there was no pain. It was just 20 or 30 minutes, rather than hours upon hours. And so it is super powerful in that setting. Lamaze is hypnosis. So even the traditional birthing techniques. But anyway, to the larger story about hypnosis, it's an ancient modality. Healers in indigenous cultures all used trance, shamanic healers, and they induce trance in different ways. There's plant medicine, there's drumming, there's many ways into trance. And so trance is a natural state. If you're driving home from work and you pull into the driveway and don't remember the trip, you were in hypnosis. That's hypnoidal hypnosis. Or watching a movie and you're in it, you just feel like you're in the middle of it. That's hypnosis. Or caught up in a good book. That moment where your eyes flutter right before sleep, that's a hypnotic moment. Great time to break out your notebook and write a few goals down. So there are 3 levels: hypnoidal, cataleptic, and somnambulism. So it's a natural state. And what's going on is just a deep relaxation with a focused concentration. Now, in the old days, back in the 18th and 19th century, there was a fellow, Franz Mesmer, mesmerism. You may have heard the term that popularized it, and he called it animal magnetism. But there was a big uproar, and the medical community investigated. Benjamin Franklin was even on the investigative committee, and they because they couldn't measure what was going on in the brain, they largely attributed it to the persuasion of the hypnotist and the subjective experience of the client or patient, and that's been relegated to the subjective, non-evidence-based realm since then, until recently, when we developed amazing technology to measure what's going on in the brain. And there are studies going on at Stanford under Dr. David Spiegel, also largely happening in the UK. There's a project called the Human Givens Project, and they're measuring what's going on in the brain. And they can tell you that that part of the brain that gets you to pay attention is kind of suspended, and it also syncs up the parts of the brain that control your heart rate and your pulse and your breathing and all of these things. So the mind and body sync up, and that part of you and the frontal cortex that to pay attention is kind of suspended, and that executive function part that that would make you embarrassed about something, it's also suspended. So that's why you can get people up there to bark like a dog or cluck like a chicken. And so now it has moved into the realm of evidence-based therapies, because we can measure what's going on. So, but it's not widely understood. But if you go to Google, research, there are tons of studies of its application to conditions like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, or Crohn's disease, or migraines, or pain. There's hypnoanesthesia that you can. There's people that do the dental work and the whole operations without general anesthesia, using hypnosis only. So the three stages at hypnoidal, you go in naturally on your own. Catalepsy is usually induced through an induction. Catalepsy is characterized by your hands and feet going to sleep, and it's much like what you experience when you dream. And you may wake up from a dream and your hands and feet are kind of numb. We do that to protect ourselves or who we might be sleeping next to, right? When we're slaying the dragon in the middle of our dream, we don't hurt ourselves or somebody else because our hands and feet are kind of numb, and that's catalepsy. Somnambulism is the part where you see them go to sleep on stage. It's amnesia, and it's more sleep-like. I work in catalepsy because I want people to be somewhat conscious of what is happening and their therapeutic approach that I'm using, the metaphors and suggestions. People will sometimes be deep in catalepsy and say, well, I felt like I was asleep. I felt like I was snoring. I said, have you ever heard yourself snore when you were asleep? And they said, no. I said, well, that was the difference. You weren't asleep. You were in catalepsy. So it's super powerful. It's pervasive. You go into it every day. And part of the problem is it's ripe for misappropriation by Hollywood and television, because it's mysterious. It's deceptively simple, and that's another thing. We want to make things overly complicated in this day and age, but it is deceptively simple, and it is extremely powerful, because just as the nocebo and placebo effect work, so too does the suspension of your conscious mind and the direction of your subconscious mind. I'm talking to the part of the mind that allows you to ride a bike without having to learn how over and over and over, or shift a car, right? And so we have these experiences and we develop behavior, and this behavior is learned and persists. Now, if the threat that you develop the behavior is gone, or the person who was threatening it, they may even be dead, but the subconscious mind is fearful of experiencing that pain again, so it holds on to the behavior. So these are some of the reasons that we hold on to this programming. Or, sometimes people get a secondary gain. They might receive something for holding on to this behavior, like sympathy, compassion, an escape from boredom. There are all kinds of reasons that people hold on to their issues. It becomes their story. And so the first thing I usually do with people is like, are you ready to write a new story?
Yeah, that's a big one. I find that a lot with patients, especially if they're going through, a disease process that has a lot of emotion attached to it, like cancer, Alzheimer's, all of those things. Or, even others where they're getting that attention. So do you find that that's one of the major reasons why people have a hard time letting go, because they identify with that and it gains attention for them?
There are many reasons for secondary gain, but usually there is a secondary gain that they're getting, and they become their story, and it becomes their identity. Some people, we've all seen people on Facebook oversharing about their colitis or their, stuff
all
like that,
the time.
It's really hard to divorce ourselves from that sometimes when we get in that group, because here's what happens. listen, we're really smart, and we dive in and we learn all about our condition. And then we become invested in it. And we've been sold on the idea largely that there's a pill that we can take, which I just really try and, direct people away from chemical therapies because it's really just a management. And it's kind of sad that doctors have become kind of symptoms managers. I had a client with fibromyalgia, and she had it for 9 years, and for 8 years, all they could do was give her opioids. They gathered up the list of symptoms and gave a diagnosis of autoimmune that was, probably fibromyalgia. And they said, there's nothing we can do but help you manage your pain. And so for 8 years, she was on opioids. And finally, she got tired of that and got off the opioids and was looking for a way to get away from the pain. And so she came to me, and I'm always the last resort. They've tried everything out.
I'm in the same boat as you.
Yeah. And so, so I took a history, and, she was a very tough person. She'd been in the Air Force, and she was an executive in the man's world. And so, no one had ever asked. I'm like, what was going on in your life when this started? And it turns out she was going through a really bitter divorce with a custody battle. And she was really tough on the outside, but emotionally she was a marshmallow. And what she did was she somatized this pain into her body, because physically she could take it, but emotionally she couldn't. And when the divorce settled and she moved on, they became co-parents, and, things settled, she held on to this because her subconscious was still afraid of that emotional pain and the exposure to it. So I took her through some sessions to help her lift that pain. It began with, are you ready to let this go? She goes, if I could let it go, I'd have done it years ago. I'm like, well, if you could let it go, are you ready? She said, yes. I'm like, and so I just took her through, the process of letting it go and releasing it from her body. The somatic response is really powerful. There's another great book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, love that book.
Yeah. And so what we do is we somatize our emotional problems into our body oftentimes. And there are really basic body syndromes, like unexplained leg pain, you can't run from your problems, or unexplained arm pain, you can't fight your way out of something, or unexplained back pain, you're carrying the weight of the world. And these are simplifications, but it's the basis for oftentimes what people are dealing with. And it's really hard. You can't just come right out and say, look, you created this. And I know your pain is real, but it's kind of in your head, so you can't approach it that way. What you have to do is you have to educate and connect dots between their experiences, and then kind of incrementally work your way toward lifting the conditions that created what they're dealing with.
Yeah. Can anybody be hypnotized, or is there like a criteria that they have to pass, or are there those that can't be hypnotized?
Great question. Dr. Spiegel at Stanford will tell you that the research shows that it's 80-20, 80% can, 20% can't. I'll tell you from my experience, if you want to, you can. But if you cross your arms and say, I dare you to get in, I can't hypnotize you. The 20% or the 20% in Dr. Spiegel's population are largely highly analytical.
Yeah.
And, but you see, there are inductions to induce hypnosis with a highly analytical. What you do is you engage them on two different levels at the same time. And hypnosis is all about overloading with message units and triggering the fight or flight response. And you can see when you're loading them up, there's a moment where they escape, and you can just see, and their eyes will go into REM. And so so if you're really good and you're really dedicated to you can get even the most highly analytical into hypnosis. There are rapid inductions, and there are ways to do it. But you never want to do anything. You don't want to lift pain that you don't know the origin for. You don't want to take people into hypnosis that don't want to go. You don't want to do things against people's will. I'm really uncomfortable by the stage hypnosis. It serves a purpose,
Yeah.
to show you how powerful it is. But I occupy the therapeutic realm, and I'm very serious about helping people with natural solutions. And the other part makes me uncomfortable, but it serves a purpose. But everything I do is highly intentional, and it's all directed at empowering people with their own solutions.
You've been in politics, for a long time. Do you see that, especially, we just came out of a year of the political elections. Do you see when, these politicians are on, campaigning, are they using hypnotic things in whenever they're speaking or in their press releases? Do you see any of that?
So here are the three things that you need for hypnotic modality.
Yeah.
Authority, a doctrine or a paradigm, and you need to feel something. All right. So let's look at some seemingly obvious examples of this. Lab coat and stethoscope, medical books and medical school. And do you feel something when you go to the doctor?
Yeah.
Not a good place to have your blood pressure taken, right? The lab coat, the white coat syndrome. And maybe you get good news, maybe you get bad news. Ultimately, you feel something. So medicine is a hypnotic modality. How about this one? The white collar, the book, pick one, whether it's the Torah, the Quran, the Bible, or the Bhagavad Gita. And do you feel something when you go to temple or church or mosque? And people do. They feel something. So this is a hypnotic modality, religion. And politics is no different. Let's look at another one. Doctors Fauci and Birx, virology and epidemiology. And do you feel something when you think about the Rona? I mean, there are a lot of people really afraid right now. And so we are under mass hypnosis. Yeah. And then the television repetitively over and over and over and over. And they're showing you overrun hospitals and people, it's a hypnotic modality. Yeah. And so oftentimes I have to dehypnotize people, and to get them to a state of homeostasis, and then we can rehypnotize them and go into an area that's beneficial to them. But there's mass hypnosis going on. Television is mass hypnosis. I don't own a television. It's called programming.
Yeah, exactly. Right? It's, so, like with that said, do you think that, or have you found that a person can hypnotize themselves?
All hypnosis is self-hypnosis. All I do is I'm a guide. And so all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. And of course, people can learn to hypnotize themselves. Listen, meditation, there's a very thin line between deep meditation and hypnosis. All right. You can be in a trance state in deep meditation. If you enter meditation with a shamanic drumming track, you're largely in hypnosis. And what I do is, I do it for myself. I will write a hypnotic script for myself, record it, and play it back. You're highly suggestible to yourself. Because if you're anything like me, you can talk yourself into or out of just about anything, right? Yeah. Because it's that rationality part. So there's two parts of the brain. There's the conscious and the subconscious. And the conscious mind is characterized by reason, analysis, logic, decision-making, willpower. And the subconscious mind is all of our knowns, whether good or bad. It doesn't distinguish between good or bad, just known and unknown. The known is good and the unknown is scary. And the problem is, if you've seen the iceberg graphic, the conscious mind is just the tip and the subconscious mind is the body underneath. And so the conscious mind takes in the data from the five senses and it measures it against our experience and our subconscious programming. And if something doesn't comport with our programming, we'll come up with a rationalization. Like, for example, if your programming is somewhere along the line accepted cigarettes, But your conscious mind reads the label on the box. It says the Surgeon General says this is likely to kill you. But you have accepted it in your programming. You're going to rationalize that, well, I know people who smoked into their 90s. I was going to die anyway, and you know what I'm saying? So you'll come up with these rationalizations and continue to puff away, even in the face of a tragic upper respiratory disease that's striking smokers. I'm getting a lot of smoker clients right now that are afraid because of corona. But you see what I'm saying? It's the conscious mind will come up with a rationalization to overcome your fear because it's known and it's accepted by your programming in your subconscious mind.
I see a lot of patients, especially in their youth, gaining all these diseases of what we would be considering diseases of age, and a lot of them, we talk to them about generational trauma and how emotions and trauma gets passed down from generation to generation. Have you seen that, and to what extent have you seen hypnosis work with that type of issues?
Yeah, so, the old argument, nature versus nurture, What I find is there's a lot of people who attribute things to biology when it's really environment.
Mm-hmm.
I see it in depression. Women present with, depression. And when I begin to ask them questions about their mom
Mm-hmm.
and their early experiences, and maybe their mom had undiagnosed depression, but when their mom and dad would fight, mom would withdraw and be reserved and be sullen. And so this depressive behavior was learned early on in childhood. I go back to childhood and family structure with every client. I want to know what their experience has been. Now, in the Human Gibbons Project, they'll tell you that you're in REM in vitro, and you're getting a download from your mom. So there is evidence to suggest that we have things passed down, but there's the environment of our childhood. When from 0 to 8 we are in hypnosis, we are mirroring and matching the people in our sphere of influence, and we are a sponge, and this becomes our programming for the rest of our life. And we compare everything to that early experience. About 10, 11, we begin to form our own personality and emerge into the world as ourselves, but it's highly influenced by that early experience. So with hypnosis, it's because I go back to the childhood. I do a lot of inner child work and connect people with that inner child. We have these sub-personalities. We have an inner adult. And there's transpersonal stuff. We have an inner adult, an inner parent, and an inner child. And it's really important that we're in touch with these sub-personalities. And so I do inner child work, which is largely regressing people back. And so you take them into hypnosis and you paint a picture of the details of their childhood and have them see themselves as that child. And you put them in the environment and have them see and trigger memories and then just tell them, to love on them and everything's going to be okay, and connect with them and know that they can connect at any time. And so it's really healing that inner child. I had a client who was an extremely successful psychologist, and they had 3 clinics, and they had hit kind of a ceiling, and they wanted to push past the ceiling, or trying to write a book. And it turns out that he was very hyperactive as a child, and his father had locked him in a closet because he didn't know how to deal with him. And so, freeing that little boy from the closet was a very empowering thing. And so there are, I believe, in past life regression. I do past life regression. I believe in that myself. Those who come to me and want, but interestingly, I've had people ask about past life regression, and we've been able to find things in their early childhood that when I regress them back, I can regress people right back to infancy. And I recently had someone who had a phobia over giving blood, and they'd had blood work. They'd been through disease and everything they did, but giving blood, that going to the mobile blood center and just created a sense of fear and fright, and he ran away. And so he thought, maybe there was something in his past life. Well, it turns out I regressed him to early childhood, infancy moment. And it was in the 40s, and he'd seen the cars and the houses, and he heard his mom say that your uncle died on the operating table, never give blood. And maybe she was talking to him, maybe she was talking to someone else, and he overheard it, but he remembered that. And when we freed him, when I took him back to that and he understood what the origin of this was, he no longer had that problem. So there is generational trauma. I believe that to be true. I believe that the experiences, that our ancestors have had can pass it on. But, do they do it on a cellular level, or do they do it on an environmental level? I'm not sure. And it doesn't matter, because I'll regress to whatever point it requires to help the client resolve that issue.
So that was part 1 of my interview with Norman Plotkin. To be continued next week in part 2. If you're not yet on my email list, head on over to tripleplayperformance.com. So tripleplayperformance.com. Jump on my email list. You'll get a free 16-day email series that will walk you through some of the biggest things that I utilize with patients that can get them back on the road to health. I'm going to give you all the things in there of what things I look for and what things you can be doing to improve your health and get you back on the right foot. So stay tuned for the next episode. Again, this is Dr. Mike with Triple Play Performance Podcast saying be well and aloha. If you've enjoyed this podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Connect with me on Instagram at tripleplaydoc. Stay tuned for more episodes. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell the entire world. Till the next episode, be well and aloha.